Welcome to The Art of Medicine, the program that explores the arts, business, and clinical aspects of the practice of medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Wilner. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Temple Grandin. Ms. Grandin has a doctoral degree in animal science and is a professor at Colorado State University. She is also the author of at least 9 books on autism and is perhaps the best known individual with autism in the world. I've asked her to be on the program to discuss her personal experience with autism and to share her insights, especially for parents of children with autism, autistic adults, teachers, and potential employers of people with autism. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, locumstory.com. Maybe you're curious about locums and how it might fit into your career story. But do you know all the different reasons physicians choose locums and how it works for them? At locumstory.com, you can hear firsthand stories as diverse as physicians themselves. There's not one solution for everyone. The variety of opportunities might surprise you. Locum Story is an unbiased educational resource. It has tools that let you explore trends in your specialty and compare different locums agencies. There's even a simple quiz to see if locums is right for you. Do your own research at locumstory.com. It's easy. And now to my guest. Welcome, Temple Grandin. It's an honor to have you on the show.
It's really good to be here today.
When did you learn that you were autistic?
Well, I definitely had speech delay. So I knew I was going to a special school for speech delay. I did not talk until age 4. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of good early education. I got it. And the main things I was taught was turn taking, waiting and taking turns, how to say words, and also just basic skills. I see we're not teaching enough life skills.
Who did this teaching for you?
It was 2 teachers that worked out of the basement of their house in a housing development. They were just those really good teachers that know how to work with kids. And some teachers have the ability because you've got to push autistic kids somewhat. But if you push too hard, then they go into meltdown and sensory overload. They knew just how hard to push. And I had a really good program. I liked going to speech therapy. And I can remember the frustration of not being able to talk. Horribly frustrating. And there's a lot of temper tantrums that are caused by frustration because you can't communicate.
Well, there's a movie about you that I watched yesterday, and it was so fascinating. I watched it again this morning, and there's a lot that deals with your early years, and not being able to talk because at one point you were actually expelled from school for hitting another, I think, for throwing a book.
That's right, 9th grade. I was bullied. I was called all kinds of names. Teenage years were absolutely the worst part of my life. I was fully verbal then. But the bullying, I finally got sent to special school, and they put me to work cleaning horse stalls and taking care of the horse barn. I was proud of the fact that I ran the horse barn. Also, riding horses and showing horses was a place where I could have friends. This is another important thing. Friends through shared interests. Because fortunately, the bullies were not interested in horses. And then another activity was Model Rocket Club. And fortunately, the bullies were not there. Now, there's been other situations where an autistic kid was interested in music. So at one school, participating in the band was absolutely wonderful. In another school, unfortunately, the bullies were in the band. And that did not work out so well.
Before I draw too much on the movie, let me ask you how realistic is that movie to your life? Would you say it's 50% accurate, 100%?
Well, let's just talk about the stuff that's absolutely correct in that movie. This is the HBO movie, Temple Grandin. It shows how visual thinking works. I'm a visual thinker. It shows that. All the projects I did in the movie, I actually did. They used original drawings, and the main characters were shown very nicely. My mother, Mr. Carlock, and Anne, they were shown very well. That's one of the most important parts. Now, there's some stuff they had to compress, mix things around. But the most important things like visual thinking, that was shown absolutely accurately.
So you're pretty satisfied with the film?
I think they did a really good job on it. And Claire learned how to mimic my voice. I gave her old VHS tapes, and she practiced and practiced with them. And there was an NPR interview where they were running clips of the movie and interviewing me, and I almost mixed us up.
Well, frankly, I was quite startled last night because I had just finished watching the movie, and then you called to confirm our interview today. And it's like, gee, that lady has the same voice as the one I saw in the movie, who I knew was not you, was an actress. And I think that actress did a
Well,
fantastic job.
she spent hours and hours and hours listening to old audio, old VHS tapes, and she had a movement coach and a speech coach. She worked really hard to learn how to sound and act like me.
And well, I don't want too much time to go by before I jump into what I think is really could be the most helpful. What do you tell parents who have a child who, has tantrums from normal things? They turn on the dishwasher, the kid has a tantrum. They try and get the haircut, the kid has a tantrum. Just getting through life. What do you advise parents to
A
do?
lot of these problems are sensory. And one of the ways that could help us with the dishwasher, let the child turn it on. Now, I'd rather work first on something where I can keep turning it on and off, like a vacuum cleaner or a hair dryer. And vacuum cleaners are often scary things that they hate. And when the child gets to turn it on and off themselves, they can do that repeatedly. They get used to that sound, then the vacuum cleaner becomes a fun toy. Give the child control of the dreaded stimulus. And I'd rather start with something like a hair dryer where I can repeatedly turn it on and off. Things like hair cutting, that's sensory. Again, maybe control. I don't know, he can't cut his own hair, but maybe he could take some scissors and cut some furry fabric or something like that.
What about psychologically?
He could cut that, the hair on that. See, giving them control. And then some kids wear headphones all the time, and that just makes sound sensitivity worse. But what you want to do is have them with you. So if the fire alarm goes off or there's some other big noise, they can put them on. This concept of control is really important on some of the sensory things with meltdowns. The other thing we've got to look at, especially in older kids that remain nonverbal, is a hidden painful medical issue. Unfortunately, too many doctors say, oh, those swollen legs were just autism, or some other thing, was just autism. Then we find out he's got bad acid reflux, or he's got constipation. The other day, I heard a horror story about an untreated urinary tract infection. No wonder the behavior was totally horrible, or a toothache, or an ear infection. These things need to be checked. There was one individual, an adult, nonverbal, had very limited vitamin C in his diet, and the doctor said it was autism. No, it was scurvy. It's vitamin C deficiency. I actually looked up the minimum daily requirements for vitamin C, and he was not eating it. And vitamin C supplements cleared it up. I call these the hidden, painful medical issues that a nonverbal individual can't tell you about. You've got to roll them out. Too many doctors just say, well, it's just autism. I've heard that over and over again when there was a real medical problem that they could not tell you about.
Yes, and this is a problem in institutions where people who cannot advocate for themselves, either because of language or some other disability, may have a legitimate medical issue that's kind of buried, and you have to look pretty hard, and you can't use the usual questions like, does it hurt when you urinate?
Well, they can't tell you, but maybe they're grabbing at their stomach, or there was one girl, she was rubbing in her ear. This is real recent. They looked in her ear, and there was pieces of an earbud down her ear. These are cases I've just heard about recently in just the last 6 months when I bring it up. Last conference I was at, I brought this up, and I had 2 horror stories come up, ear infection and a very dangerously advanced urinary tract infection.
In the movie, your mother brought you to a physician when you were about 4 because you weren't talking and having lots of tantrums. And the way it was portrayed, he very bluntly said, well, she's autistic. My recommendation is you put her in an institution.
Well, that was the way in the 50s it normally was done. So that scene's historically accurate. This is one thing where the movie is different. But what actually happened, Mother took me to Bronson Crothers at Boston Children's Hospital, a neurologist, not a psychiatrist, a neurologist. And he referred me to the little speech school that two teachers did out of their home.
All right. So points for the neurologist then.
It was a neurologist and a very forward-thinking neurologist. He tested me for epilepsy and deafness, for petit mal epilepsy, and that was negative.
Right. And of course, deafness is someone doesn't talk, and maybe because they don't hear. And
well, I talked to a lot of very low-income families. They're on 2-year wait lists, 3-year-olds on 2-year wait lists in some of the rural areas. That's horrible. And I said, you're going to have to start working with this kid, rule out deafness. You got to make sure it's not deaf. And you've got to start working. Let's just start with little turn-taking games. We'll just take a ball and roll it back and forth, or take turns spinning a penny. Turn it into a little turn-taking game. Get the kid engaged, and get them out doing things. Take them outside in the park, and let's look at the trees and point things out.
Now, in my day job, I teach medical students and residents, and some pediatric residents who are going to become pediatric neurologists. And I mentioned to them that I was going to be speaking with you, and I asked them if they had any questions for you. And they wrote up that about medical visits. Let me read what they wrote.
Okay.
Would you like to share some childhood memories of your doctor visits? And could you share an enjoyable encounter or a fond memory of a certain doctor that made you feel comfortable? What did they do?
Well, you got to remember, I'm old enough, and you're probably old enough to remember the old glass syringes with the reusable needles. And this is something they did. Maybe it worked today. I just got a flu shot. I couldn't even feel it. The needle's so fine. But back in the 50s, they told me to look out the window at the bird feeder, stuck me with that horrible old-fashioned needle, and I hit the ceiling. So one of the things we did to help me to relax after that was we go in for a checkup, and the doctor looked in the records to see if I had to have a vaccine, and then we got it over with. And then I could relax for the rest of the exam.
Mm.
That helped a whole lot. Very simple thing that helped a whole lot. I brought that up at a meeting, and I go, oh, my parents said, oh, I do that. That really helped a lot. The simple thing you can do. The other thing is no surprises. I had my tonsils out at age 6, and the dish strainer thing, ether, and the nurse just went, it doesn't hurt me, and put it on me. There was no screaming and holding me down. She just said, it doesn't hurt me, and then put it on me. I remember that very clearly. I was 6.
All right, well, let's flip the coin. What about visits that didn't go well, and why?
What medical stuff that didn't go well?
You went to the doctor, and it was not a pleasant experience. What happened there?
Well, my checkups after that, were good. And there's a lot of medical stuff I had to figure out for myself. I'm very, very happy that I am a very, very good scientific researcher. And I got to thank Mr. Carlock, who showed me how to look things up in the Index Medicus. And in my book, Thinking in Pictures, my old autobiography, I discussed my experience with antidepressant medication. I take a very low dose of disipramine, 50 milligrams a day, went on it when I was in my early 30s, and the nonstop colitis I had cleared up. I was afraid I was going to lose my innards. The colitis was so bad. And it stopped this constant fear. I mean, it's actually something wrong with the nervous system. And I kind of compared it to adjusting the idle screw on an old-fashioned carburetor. You'll know what that is.
Yes.
They won't know what a carburetor is.
No.
But you turn the screw, and it would change the idle speed of the engine when the car was in neutral. And I kind of, I like visual analogies. And I've been on the medication ever since. And I describe all my experiences in here. And the mistake that gets made with antidepressants is too high a dose. I'm taking the starter dose, that's all. Too high a dose, you get agitation and insomnia. But I don't even hardly know if I'd be alive today. I'm 77 today. The way all that nervousness, endogenous anxiety was tearing me apart. So how did I figure out to use that drug? Well, I read an article in Psychology Today about the promise of biological psychiatry. And they talked about Nardil. Oh, too many dietary restrictions for that, and taught for them. And then I went and looked the doctor's name up in the old Index Medicus, it's those big fat phone book-like books, found this paper on endogenous anxiety. And I had 8 out of 10 of the symptoms. That's where I learned about it, because Mr. Carlock, my science teacher, had taught me how to look up scientific journal articles. So that's why I was able to do that. This is back in the old days where you looked the abstracts up in these great big books. And fortunately, our library had the paper, and I copied it on a photocopier.
In the movie, they talk about how it was difficult for you to have physical interaction with other people, like being hugged. That was comfortable for you.
One of the things that helped me on that was my squeezing machine. Again, I could control it. See, this is very important in the desensitization, where when Aunt Bella grabbed me, she was big and real overweight, and she had this horrible perfume, and I couldn't control it. But now I hug people. But you see, I can control the squeeze machine.
So you can do that now?
Oh, yeah, I can do that now. Yeah, I can do that just fine now.
Well, you know, from what I have learned is that living with a child who has autism bringing up children is not easy, even if they're typical children. And if they're atypical children, or use the term neurodivergent, it can be pretty tough on the parents. What would you say to the parents?
Well, fortunately, I had, didn't sleep very well, but we had a rule. I could stay up all night if I wanted to, as long as just the reading light was on, didn't make any noise. And I got up in the morning and was ready for school pickup by 7:30. And usually I was. And there was very good, even rules between home and school. Tantrum was equal to one night of no television, whether it was at school or at home, very calmly and consistent. That was the rule, period. And the only time they didn't enforce that was we were on a ferry boat with a super loud horn. And I flung myself on the deck and screamed. And then what we did there is they let me ride in the cabin below where it wasn't as loud. They should have done is taken me up where the captain was and let me pull the cord.
Let you press the button.
Let me press the button coming into the harbor. It's a cord that you pull, and let me pull the cord. You see, right. Giving that control, finding that's been very useful.
Let me shift to one of your favorite topics, I think, horses and cows.
Yeah.
Now, you gravitated just naturally to livestock.
I want to bring up the important thing is I gravitated as a teenager. I had to be exposed to horses and cattle. This brings up another thing. Kids have to be exposed. Like kids get interested in video games, are they exposed to that? They get interested in cars because they're exposed to it. But I'm seeing kids growing up today never use a tool. I'm seeing smart math kids that aren't having their mathematics abilities developed when they should be. But in order for a kid to get interested and get fixated, they've got to get exposed to a lot of different things. And I discuss this in my later book, Visual Thinking, Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. Because there's the object visualizer like me, who's bad at algebra, is one type of autistic mind. Then there's the mathematical kid, music and math and patterns. I'm seeing those kids not be developed. Make them do baby math over and over again, they turn into gigantic behavior problems. And then the word thinking autistic. They know lots of facts about their favorite subject. And they're like 3 kind of different autistic minds that get highly specialized.
Horseback riding has been proposed as a therapy for autism. What do you think about that?
Well, it can be very effective. Now, I realize that, for low-income folks, they'll get access to horses, but you can do other things with swinging and, with swings and things you can rock on. And sometimes if you work on the speech therapy right while you're swinging or while you're on the horse. So if you don't have access to a horse, then while you're on the swing, you try to get a conversation going. Balancing, just get on an exercise ball and balance. I want to emphasize things that our low-income people can do. And sometimes that's helpful. You're stimulating the vestibular system. I don't think anybody really knows how it works, but it seems to work. And it's a simple thing to do. I've had many parents tell me my kid did the first word on a horse. But also there's you can also get that swinging and sitting on a gym, a great big gym ball.
So do you think it's the movement,
The movement,
the
doing the
movement?
movement. In fact, I just was at a conference with the horse boy, Isaac Rupertson, the movement therapy. And what they basically say is get the kid out moving, and then you work on the speech. While there, you give all kinds of activities involving lots of moving. And that was very effective with his son. I got to meet his son. He's a little hyper. He jumps around, laughs a lot, but he was really severe when he was young.
What do you do with teenagers or other school children who are being bullied because, like you, they're different?
Well, the bullying is a real problem. And people ask me, what can we do to make school more inclusive? Well, one thing that was done when I was in elementary school is the teachers explained to the other children that I had a handicap or a disability that wasn't visible and they shouldn't be bullying me. So I managed to get through elementary school without being bullied. High school was just horrible. Like that's called peer mediated intervention. And I got off and hit somebody, and I lost some horseback riding privileges for that. And I had to switch from anger to crying. I was still totally miserable, but crying didn't get me into trouble the way fighting did. But the thing that helped me was friends who shared interest. No, teenage years, worst part of my life.
There was a very touching relationship in the movie with you and your next roommate. The first roommate bailed. She wasn't too happy with your antics and squeeze machine. But
Yeah.
then you ended up with a roommate who was blind.
Yes, I did. Did have a blind roommate. They made one little change. They put her into college. I had her in graduate school. And I was getting my master's. But I did have a blind roommate. She was one of my best roommates, and she was shown very nicely.
And you two bonded in part, I think, because you both knew you were different.
Yeah, also we were both Star Trek fans. And in the dorm at that time, they had one TV, and it always tuned to Monday Night Football. And then I said to Gloria was her real name, well, I think you can get a radio that will pull in TV stations. And she got a radio that pulled in TV stations, and we would listen to Star Trek and this classic Trek, and it was still pretty good. And we'd listen to Star Trek together Monday night on the radio.
That's fantastic. Well, as anyone who knows me will tell you, I am also quite the Star Trek fan. So we have that in common. Now, I know one of the themes that you speak about is employment for adults with autism. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
This is where we're really not doing a good job. We're doing a better job getting the little kids through. We're doing oftentimes a good job with academics. But too often I hear about a student that's magna cum laude, graduates from college, never held a job. And they need to learn working skills before they graduate from college. I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal about regular college students. You can sometimes learn more working in a restaurant than you could at some fancy internship, because you'd learn more about just getting along with people. But we need to start teaching them how to do a job for somebody outside the home. I have grandparents that come up to me all the time, and they discover they're autistic when they're older. And that's a big, big relief in their relationships, huge relief. But they all had decent jobs. A pharmacist, engineer, a fence builder, a whole lot of decent jobs. And they had paper routes at age 11. So we need to find some paper route substitutes. Church volunteer job, volunteer at a senior center, help out old person, but it needs to be somebody outside the home on a schedule. Instant and legal, they need to get real jobs. And I would recommend avoiding the rapid multitasking chaos of a takeout window. Let's just avoid that. And the other thing that would help on a lot of jobs is using pilots' checklists for tasks that have a sequence. And you write it down in sequence, in bullet points, just like a pilot's checklist. This is how you close out the cash register. Because if someone just tells me, I don't remember the sequence, that would save a lot of jobs. Simple checklists.
Right. So it's not that you don't understand language. I mean, we're having a perfectly good conversation here, but that images stick in your mind better. Would you say
Well,
that's
let's just say my computer guy showed me how to do a hard reboot on a computer when you really got to teach a computer a lesson when it's bad. And there's 5 steps for the hard reboot. And he goes, boom, 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 boom. I can't remember that. I said, okay, Chris, let me write down exactly what I do. I hold the switch down for this long, and then I press some other button for 10 seconds. There were 5 steps. I wrote them down on a post-it note, and it's fastened to my bookshelf. Even now, I have to write that down. He shows me, he said, well, you just do this. I can't remember that.
I'm looking through my notes here. I read your book, Autism and Education, The Way
Okay.
I See It. Anything you'd like to comment about
Well,
that?
that's a great book for parents to get a young child diagnosed, so they're not inundated with a big threatening, a huge fat book, and it has the essentials in it. I recommend that book if you have a 3-year-old that gets diagnosed. That'd be a good book just to hand to them. And it's small. We actually made it small on purpose so they wouldn't be so intimidated with too much stuff.
You know, one of the things I think that's sort of complicated to understand about autism is that um, we don't think of it as a disease or a disorder that can be cured. It's just kind of a difference.
Well, the
Could,
problem is autism in its milder forms is just a personality variant. When does nerd and geek become autism? There's no black and white dividing line. The other problem you've got is at one end of the spectrum, you've got Einstein and the heads of big tech companies. Yes, it's interesting to watch them squirm around in Congress. Real interesting. And squirm around in depositions. I've looked those videos up. But then you have someone who remains nonverbal, but some of those can learn how to type independently. And then there's some where there's a whole bunch of other medical stuff wrong with them, where autism is probably the correct diagnosis. They're doing it to get services. You see, and we have this name on such a wide range of conditions. And one of the problems I see now, I might see a smart autistic kid, maybe more the Asperger type. I know we don't use that term anymore, where there's no speech delay. And parents get into this kind of bad mode where they don't think their kid can do anything. I'm seeing too many smart, fully verbal teenagers never gone shopping by themselves, don't have a bank account,
hmm.
just not learning life skills. I'm running into this over and over again. I was shopping when I was 7 and 8 years old.
There was a nice scene in the movie where your mother is very reluctant to drop you off at boarding school because it felt like she was abandoning you, and the teacher that really recognized your potential said to her, well, she's gonna meet life head on at some point, and this is a way to start that
Well, that's
process.
right. Actually, I think being at a boarding school helped me adapt to college better because I was used to living away from home. That might have been helpful.
Well, Temple Grandin, this has been very interesting conversation for me. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Well, I think we need to be looking at what the individual can do. I'll give you one little tip on the nonverbals. Yeah, this desktop's not going to work for teaching a nonverbal to type because I got to look way down here to see the button, and then the print appears way up there. Use a tablet where the print appears next to the keyboard. They have problems with gaze shifting. Tablet's one of the best things to use, and they're readily available.
Temple Grandin, I want to thank you for joining me on the Art of Medicine.
Thank you for having me.
Before we close, I'd like to give another thanks to our sponsor, locumstory.com, a resource where providers can get real, unbiased answers about locum tenens. I'm Dr. Andrew Wilner. See you next time. This program is hosted, edited, and produced by Andrew Wilner, MD, FACP, FAAN. Guests receive no financial compensation for their appearance on the Art of Medicine. Andrew Wilner, MD, is Associate Professor of Neurology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, Memphis, Tennessee. Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this program belong solely to Dr. Wilner and his guests and not necessarily to their employers, organizations, or other group or individual. While this program intends to be informative, it is meant for entertainment purposes only. The Art of Medicine does not offer professional financial, legal, or medical advice. Dr. Wilner and his guests assume no responsibility or liability for any damages, financial or otherwise, that arise in connection with consuming this program's content. Thanks for watching. For more episodes of The Art of Medicine, please subscribe. www.andrewwilner.com